How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Thursday, Yom Hamishi. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Thursday? Skipping on me. Yehud in South Carolina. Bella in Florida. Belle in Texas. Lucy in Minnesota. Joe in the Inland Empire. Melissa in Great Neck. John in Maine. Sharon in New Jersey. Is Sai the Talmud cat with you, Sharon? I was so psyched to actually put a face with the name, the face of your cat, when you posted in the AT forum. We welcome Sai the Talmud cat. And Lorraine in Texas. Gail in Kansas City. Frank in San Pedro. Aoife in Florida. Ella in Southern California. Chaim in Florida. Paul in the Great Northwest. Welcome, everybody. Lots to do today. We got a double. We're continuing our discussion, which we just started yesterday, of Mishna number 2 here in chapter 6. And with God's help, we're going to complete chapter 6 today here in Tractate Shevuos, 26th volume of the Talmud. We're picking this up near the bottom of page 42b. And with God's help today, we'll do pages 43 completely and 44 as well. Get well into 44b when we complete the chapter. Michelle checking in from increasingly humid Jupiter, Florida. Almost July. Gotta be pretty hot. And a happy Juneteenth to everybody. Okay, right at the bottom of page 42b, continuing our discussion of this Mishnah number 2 in chapter 6, which was, we've been talking about oaths, right? The oath of deposit, that a person who claims, who says, I don't have what you think I have, and I swear that I don't have it, or I don't owe you what you think I owe you. I admit to partial of what you're claiming from me, but not all of it. He swears the oath of deposit and he's done. Or the oath of inducement, which is a situation where somebody just brings a claim. There's not even a single witness. There is no partial admission, but the claim, sounds good enough that the judges will say to the defendant, okay, you don't owe this. We think that this plaintiff wouldn't be bringing the case if he didn't have some grounds. But if you swear that you don't owe what the plaintiff claims you owe, then swear the oath of inducement and you're off the hook. Here in Mishnah number 2, we're looking at items upon which oaths are not sworn at all. So consecrated items was one such thing, financial documents or land, which fall outside the purview of the types of property over which an oath would be sworn. Okay, bottom of page 42b, the Mishnah taught an unpaid bailee, right? So somebody who is watching property for his friend, because he's not getting paid, he's doing it as a favor. An unpaid bailee who lost one of the excluded items does not take an oath, right? Meaning that if it wasn't an excluded item, if we weren't talking about consecrated property, or we weren't talking about financial documents or something that is outside that purview, the unpaid bailee, who doesn't have to make good on something that he lost, unless he's negligent. I think there has to be actual negligence for him to be responsible. But if it's simply gone, he's saying, yeah, I don't have it. I'm not stealing it from you. It's gone. It's lost. So he swears that it's lost and that he's not holding it, and then he's exempt from payment. That would be in contrast to the paid bailee. If you're paying somebody to watch your property and they say, hey, I lost it, you say, well, I paid you to watch it, not to lose it. So if you lose it, you're liable, right? The paid bailee would be liable. The unpaid bailee could swear an oath and not be liable. But because we're talking about property that is excluded from oaths, in this case, the unpaid bailee doesn't even have to swear an oath. He's exempt from that. Right? Unpaid bailee who lost one of the excluded items does not take an oath. And the Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? The Gemara answers that it is, as the sages taught in a baraisa. Now on page 43a, the verse introduces the laws with regard to an unpaid bailee with the phrase from Exodus 22:6, if a man delivers to his neighbor silver or vessels to safeguard, right? He's going to be safeguarding, he's going to be watching the items. So the phrase, if a man delivers to his neighbor, this is a generalization. Silver or vessels is a detail. And when the verse states to safeguard, it then generalized again. Consequently, this verse contains a generalization, a detail, and a generalization, in which case you may deduce that the verse is referring only to items similar to the detail. Applying that principle here, one concludes that just as each of the items mentioned in the detail is clearly defined as an item that is movable property and has intrinsic monetary value, movable property as opposed to land or Canaanite slaves, which are treated like land, and intrinsic monetary value as opposed to financial documents, which can represent a large amount of money that are described in the financial documents, but the paper itself has no intrinsic value. So too, an unpaid bailee takes an oath concerning anything that is movable property and has intrinsic monetary value. Land is therefore excluded as it is not movable property. Canaanite slaves are excluded as they are compared to land in many areas of halacha. Financial documents are excluded since, although they are movable property, they do not have intrinsic monetary value. Consecrated property is excluded because it is written in the verse, if a man delivers to his neighbor. And this term indicates that both the one depositing the item and the bailee must be people and not the temple treasury. The Mishna taught that a paid bailee, now we're talking about a paid bailee, somebody who is paid to watch property for another. His level of responsibility and liability, if it's lost, stolen, destroyed, etc., his responsibility is much higher. The Mishna taught that a paid bailee does not pay for the loss or theft of one of these items. So the Gemara asks, from where do we derive this law? And the Gemara answers, it is as the sages taught in a baraisa. The verse includes the laws with regard to a paid bailee with the phrase, if a man delivers to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any animal to guard. Exodus 22:9. So the phrase, if a man delivers to his neighbor, generalization. The phrase, a donkey, ox, sheep, this is a detail. When the verse states, or any animal to safeguard, it then generalized again. Consequently, we have generalization and detail and generalization, which excludes any item that is not similar to the detail, as delineated in the previous baraisa with regard to the unpaid bailee, up to and including the last clause of that baraisa where it said consecrated property is excluded because it is written in the verse, delivers to his neighbor. So the Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Meir says there are certain items that are like land with regard to their form, but are not treated like land from a halachic perspective. And the rabbis do not concede that this is so, as they hold that the halachic status of anything that is attached to the land is like the land itself. We looked at that case yesterday where somebody asked a friend to become a bailee, to become a guard, of his fully ripened clusters of grapes that are still on the vine, right? So these are ready for picking, and he's saying, okay, now somebody might come along and want to harvest and steal my grapes because they're ripe and ready to go. So that's why he hires a guard. Then if the grapes disappear, the guard, was he negligent? Was he not? Was he paid? Was he unpaid? But really what's going on is, are those clusters of grapes considered movable property or not? If they had already been taken off the vine and there was a pile of grapes, either on the ground or in a cart, whatever, that's clearly movable property. But while they're still on the vine, even though they only lack a quick cut with scissors, they haven't been cut. They are on the vine, and therefore they're attached to the land. And produce that is attached to the land has the halakhic status of land, not movable property. That was the issue there. The rabbis do not concede, right? Rabbi Meir would say that those grapes are like movable property, but the majority overruled him. So the Gemara challenges. By inference, does Rabbi Meir hold that the halakhic status of anything that is attached to the land is not like the land? If so, rather than disagreeing with regard to grapevines laden with fruit, let them disagree with regard to fruitless vines. As Rabbi Meir holds that the halakhic status of the vines themselves is not like that of the land, right? What about the vines, even when they don't have grapes on them? Are we going to say that they are land? Or are we going to say that they are grapevines that have grown out of the land, but they're not the land? Sounds like, what is Rabbi Meir going to say? So Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said that they disagree here, not with regard to any item that is attached to the land, as Rabbi Meir concedes that such items usually do have the halakhic status of the land itself. The dispute is specifically with regard to grapes that are ready to be harvested, as Rabbi Meir holds that their halakhic status is similar to that of grapes that have already been harvested, for the reason I just described. I mean, if you just snip them and put them in the barrel, they're ready to eat. They're ready to eat when they're on the vine. If they're fully ripe, they just haven't been detached from the vine. That's where Rabbi Meir says it's the same item, right? It's the exact same item as you would find in the cart after they're snipped from the vine. You could eat it by plucking the grape and putting it in your mouth while it's fully ripe but still on the vine, or whether it's already been cut and it's in the cart. It's the same object. That's why Rabbi Meir says that fully ripened grape clusters are like movable property. But the rabbis don't concede. They say, no, it's still attached to the vine. It's still attached to the land. It's not yet detached. Right? If so, rather than disagreeing with regard to grapevines laden with fruit, I'm sorry, I just said that. No, the dispute is specifically with regard to grapes that are ready to be harvested, as Rabbi Meir holds that their halakhic status is similar to that of grapes that have already been harvested, and the rabbis hold that their halakhic status is not similar to that of grapes that are already harvested, that they still have the status of land because they're attached to the land. The Mishnah taught that one takes an oath only concerning an item that is defined by size, by weight, or by number. Right? This is what we're talking about, property that is going to bring us into the realm of oaths. Right? If we're going to swear an oath, well, you claim that I owe you something and I claim that I don't. We have to be talking specifically. If you say, Sal, you owe me $100, and I say I owe you $50, we get what is the difference. If you say, Sal, you owe me money, and I say, well, I owe you some money, but I don't owe you money. Like we're talking much too generalized terms, way too generalized. We need more specific amounts. Right? How so? If the claimant says, I delivered to you a house full of produce, and the other person says, I do not know how much you gave me, but what you left in my possession you may take, and the amount in the house is less than that claimed by the claimant, the defendant is exempt from taking an oath because the amounts were too amorphous. Abaye says they taught this law only in a case where the claimant said to him, I gave you a house full of produce without specification. But if he said to him, I gave you this specific house full of produce, his claim is known and defined, and the defendant is therefore required to take an oath concerning it if he says what you gave me is this house, but with less than full of produce. Right now there's a discrepancy, but we can relate it to specific enough amounts. Rava said to him, if so, rather than teaching in the last clause of the Mishnah, if this party says that the house was full up to the ledge, and the other party says that it was full up to the window, and that makes the defendant liable to take an oath, then let the Tana of our Mishnah distinguish and teach the distinction within the case itself, where the claim was for a house full of produce. And he should say, in what case is this statement that the defendant is exempt said? It is said in a case where the claim was for an unspecified house full of produce. But if the claim was for this particular house full of produce, the defendant is liable to take an oath. Since the Mishnah did not make this distinction, evidently the defendant is exempt even if the claim is referring to a specific house. And what we're arguing about is how we define the amount of produce, not the location. Rather, Rava said the defendant is never liable to take an oath unless the claimant claims from him an item that is defined by size, by weight, or by number. And the defendant admits to him with regard to a part of the claim that is an item that is defined by size, by weight, or by number. Right? And the guy says, you have in your possession something of mine that is an XL. And the guy says, no, what I have I do have something of yours, but it's an L. Right? So they've disagreed on size. But not if I say, you have hey, you owe me 100 pounds of wheat that I deposited with you. And you say, well, I owe you wheat. But, but the amount of wheat that I owe you is a bag full, So now I claim by weight, and you said, well, I owe you, but it's by volume. Those are different measurements, right? We haven't established that we're talking about the same kind of units, and it's just disagreeing on the number of units, right? If I talk about weight and you talk about volume, now granted wheat is, has a certain density. So if I claim volume and you say weight, maybe we are talking about the same thing, but we're going to see other examples where the units are totally different, and therefore we can't come to agreement and there's not going to be an oath. Let's keep going. The Gemara comments, it is taught in a baraisa, in accordance with the opinion of Rava. If the claimant says, I have a core of produce in your possession, and the other one says nothing of yours is in my possession, the defendant is exempt from taking an oath as he denies the entire debt. If he says, I have a large candelabrum in your possession, okay, so what they mean by a candelabrum here, at least according to this illustration, right, is this basically like a very tall candlestick, sort of like a floor lamp. But in the ancient world, right, it wasn't an electric floor lamp. They probably had an oil lamp at the top of it. And there's a few of those that you could spread around the room, and that would provide light in the room. Okay? So imagine, like a 6-foot tall candlestick with an oil lamp at the top. Okay. So this guy says, I have a large candelabrum in your possession. And the defendant responds, you have only a small candelabrum in my possession. Here he is exempt from the oath, as he admits not to part of the claim, but rather to possessing a different item. A small candelabrum is not part of a large candelabrum. It's a different item. It's an entirely different item. Similarly, if the claimant says, I have a large belt in your possession, and the defendant responds, you have only a small belt in my possession, he is exempt from taking an oath, because they're talking about different things. But if the claimant said to him, I have a core of produce in your possession, and the other one says you have only a half core in my possession, then he would be liable to take the oath because he has admitted to he has made a partial admission to that which was claimed from him. And similarly, if a claimant says, I have a candelabrum weighing 10 litra in your possession, and the defendant responds, you have only a 5 litra candelabrum in my possession, he is liable to take the oath. And why is that? So the Baraisa concludes, the principle of the matter is that the defendant is never liable to take an oath unless the claimant claims from him an item that is defined by size or by weight or by number, and the defendant admits to him with regard to a part of the claim that is an item that is defined in the same way that it was claimed, either by size or by weight or by number. So the Gemara asks, what does the Baraisa add that was not already taught by mentioning the principle of the matter? Doesn't the Baraisa mention the principle to add that even if the claim is for this specific house full of produce, the defendant is exempt, as this is not considered an item defined by size? So accordingly, the Baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rava. Having cited the Baraisa, the Gemara now analyzes it, this idea of the candelabrum. What is different about a case where the claimant claimed a large candelabrum and the defendant admitted to owing a small candelabrum, And we say that he's exempt because what was claimed from him is not what he admitted to. He didn't admit to part of the claim. He said, no, I don't owe you a large candelabrum. I do owe you a small candelabrum, but that's a totally different item, so he doesn't have to swear on that. Why is he exempt? It is because that which he claimed from him, he did not admit to at all, and that which he admitted to was not claimed from him. If so, in a case where the claimant said, you owe me a 10 litra candelabrum, where litra is weight, it's a weight of metal, and the defendant admitted to owing a 5 litra candelabrum, why don't we say that the defendant is also exempt in this case? As that which was claimed from him, a heavier candelabrum, he did not admit to at all, and that which he admitted to, a lighter candelabrum, he had not claimed from him. And Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak explains, here in the latter case, we are dealing with a candelabrum composed of segments that detach. The defendant is liable to take an oath because he admits to owing him part of the candelabrum claimed by the defendant, right? So it's like, imagine that this is, part of the pole that is the candelabrum, the 6 foot, and it comes in pieces, right? So the same candelabrum, you could remove a piece, right? And they stack up, and so you could take out some of the segments, and so you can make the candelabrum 3 feet tall, or you can start adding in these metal segments, and then it becomes a 6 foot candelabrum. So that's why if he says, you owe me a 6 foot candelabrum, the guy says, I only owe you a 3 foot candelabrum. He is admitting to owing the same thing that was claimed from him, minus, the middle segments that would have made it a taller one. That's why we could say that that is a partial admission of the same type of item, measured in this case by weight of metal. The Gemara asks, if so, let the Baraisa teach the case in which the defendant is liable to take an oath involving a belt as well, and interpret the case as referring to a belt made of pieces that are connected to each other. And the claimant claims a belt with a larger number of pieces, and the defendant claims that he owes him a belt with fewer pieces. Why not? So rather, clearly the Baraisa is not teaching cases involving items made of pieces connected to each other. And here too, in the case of the candelabrum, the Baraisa is not teaching a case of a candelabrum composed of segments that detach. So why would we say that the defendant has to swear? Since in the case where it was said of him, you owe me a large, he said, no, I owe you a small, he doesn't have to swear. Why, if someone says to him, you owe me a 10 litra candelabrum, and he admits, I owe a 5 litra candelabrum, he does have to swear. Why? So rather, Rabbi Abba Bar Memel said that the case of the candelabrum is different because one can scrape a 10 litra candelabrum and reduce it to a 5 litra one. Therefore, he admitted to part of the claim, whereas you can't make a large belt into a small belt. We could argue about that a lot of different ways, but apparently the kinds of belts and the kinds of candelabrum that were known in their community, you could reduce the 10 litra candelabrum to a 5, but you can't reduce the large belt to a small belt. And that concludes Mishnah number 2. Now Mishnah number 3 here in chapter 6. There is a case of one who lends money to another on the basis of collateral, and the collateral was lost while in the possession of the creditor. And the creditor says to the debtor, I lent you a sella on the basis of that collateral. But it turns out that the collateral was worth a shekel, which is only a half sella. Therefore, you owe me a shekel. And the other individual, the debtor, says in response to that claim, that is not the case. Rather, you lent me a sella on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral was worth a sella. I owe you nothing. In this case, the debtor is exempt from payment. He hasn't made a partial admission of anything. He claims, I don't owe you anything. He doesn't have to, and he's exempt from payment. There is a case of a creditor who claims, I lent you a sella on the basis of that collateral, and it was worth a shekel. And the other individual, the debtor, says that is not the case. Rather, you lent me a sella on the basis of the collateral, and the collateral was worth 3 dinars. i.e. 3/4 of a seller. So in this case, the debtor is liable to take an oath due to the fact that he responded to the claim of the creditor with a partial admission. If in that case the debtor said, you lent me a seller on the basis of the collateral, and the collateral is worth 2 seller, so now you owe me a seller. I gave you collateral that was worth more than the loan. You lost the collateral, so now you owe me money. And the other party, i.e. the creditor, said, that is not the case. Rather, I lent you a seller on the basis of the collateral, and the collateral was worth a seller. So here, the creditor is exempt, because he's claiming, I don't owe you anything. There's no partial admission. If in that case, the debtor had said, you lent me a seller on the basis of the collateral, and the collateral is worth 2 seller, and the other party, i.e. the creditor, said, that is not true. Rather, I lent you a seller on the basis of that collateral, and the collateral is worth 5 dinars. Here, the creditor is liable to take an oath due to the fact that he responded with a partial admission. And who takes the oath? The one in whose possession the deposit had been located, i.e. the creditor, who took collateral from the debtor. Right? Normally, you borrow money, and then they come to collect the money from you, and you don't have it, but you're claiming that you already paid it off, right? You're going to be the one who needs to swear an oath. Where you give collateral to the creditor, and then he loses the collateral, and now maybe it was worth more than the loan, so he owes you money, and he's claiming he doesn't. But he was the one who had the collateral, which is now lost. So if there's an oath to be sworn, it's going to be sworn by the lender, because he's now become the shomer, right? The bailee, the guard of the collateral. Who takes the oath? The one whose possession of the deposit has been located, in this case, the creditor, who took collateral from the debtor. And the sages instituted this provision lest this party, i.e. the debtor, take an oath, and the other party, i.e. the creditor, produce the deposit and prove the oath false. Right. So that's why is the lender who's holding the collateral going to force the borrower, who doesn't have the collateral in his possession because the lender has it, to swear an oath about the value of the collateral? And then, when, the guy his memory was wrong and he did something, he said something wrong. And then the lender says, aha, you swore falsely. Here is the collateral. Well, why didn't you produce the collateral before? Right? So if the one who is swearing about collateral, he's going to be the one who's holding the collateral, and that is the lender. So that concludes our Mishna. Now we're on page 43b. To which case is the final statement in the Mishna, which says the creditor is the one who takes the oath? To which case is this referring? If we say it is referring to the case in the latter clause of the Mishna, where the debtor claims that the collateral is worth more than the loan, derive this law from the fact that the oath is anyway taken by the creditor, as he is the defendant in this case, since he lost the collateral. The additional statement is superfluous. In response to that, Shmuel says the statement relates to the case in the first clause of the Mishnah, where the debtor is the defendant. And Rabbi Chiya bar Rav similarly says that it relates to the first clause. And Rabbi Yochanan also says it relates to the first clause. Right? In the first clause, he lends on the basis of collateral. The collateral was lost, but the creditor is claiming that the collateral was worth less than the amount of the loan, and that's why he now wants more money from the defendant, who is the borrower. And the Gemara asks, what did the Amoraim mean by the first clause? And so the Gemara answers, they were not referring to the very first law in the Mishnah, but rather to the latter part of the first clause. Where it said, there is a case of a creditor who claims, I lent you a seller on the basis of that collateral and it was worth a shekel. And the other individual says that, no, you lent me the seller on the basis of collateral, and the collateral is worth 3 dinars, i.e. 3/4 of a seller. In this case, he is liable to take an oath because it was a partial admission. And in this case, the oath should in principle be taken by the debtor, since he is the one who admitted to a part of the creditor's claim. But the sages removed the obligation to take an oath from the debtor and imposed it on the creditor. deeming him liable to take an oath that the collateral was not worth more than a shekel. So the Gemara notes, and now that Rav Ashi says that we maintain that 2 oaths are taken in this case, as this party, the creditor, takes an oath that the collateral is not in his possession, right? He has to swear that he doesn't have it. He's not trying to steal it. And the other party, the debtor, takes an oath concerning how much the collateral was worth. This is what the Mishna is saying. Who takes an oath first? The one in whose possession the deposit had been located, and that is the creditor. He first takes an oath that the collateral is not his possession, lest the other party, the debtor, take an oath, and then the other party, the creditor, produce the deposit and prove that the oath was false. New subject. Shmuel says, with regard to one who lent 1,000 dinars to another and took from him the handle of a sickle as collateral, if the handle of the sickle is lost, the creditor has lost the entire sum of 1,000 dinars, even though the lost collateral was worth much less. But if he took 2 handles as collateral and only one of them was lost, the creditor does not lose the entire debt. He loses only the value of the handle that he lost. And Rav Nachman says, even if he took 2 handles and only one of them was lost, he has lost 500 dinars. Right? So we're talking about an item that is worth far less than the loan. The handle of a sickle, couldn't possibly be worth 500 dinars. But it was used as collateral. Perhaps it has significant emotional value, or for whatever reason, they agreed that would be the collateral. Well, if you're holding collateral against a loan, and then you lose the collateral, you're going to lose the loan. But if he took a handle and a piece of silver as collateral, and then he lost the handle, he has not lost the debt. He has not lost half the debt, as he presumably relied on the silver, not the handle, for payment. So the sages of Nehardea say, even if he took a handle and a piece of silver, and the piece of silver was lost, he has lost only half the debt. If the handle was then lost, then he has lost the entire debt. So the Gemara challenges Shmuel's opinion based on the Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah there is a case of a creditor who claims, I lent you a sela on the basis of the collateral and it was worth a shekel. And the other individual, the debtor, says that is not the case. Rather, you lent me a sela on the basis of collateral and the collateral is worth 3 dinars. Both values are less than the amount of the loan, but they're arguing, but the borrower is admitting that he gave collateral, that he borrowed against it. They're arguing what it was worth. He's saying it's worth a little more than the lender thought it was worth. But they're admitting that they're just bickering over the value, but they agree that there was a loan, that there was collateral, and they're disagreeing how much the collateral was worth, but they agree that the collateral was worth less than the loan. It's just how much less is what is at issue between them. In this case, the debtor is liable to take an oath. According to Shmuel's opinion, that if the collateral is lost, the debt is canceled. Let the debtor say to him, you have already received payment by means of the collateral which you lost. Doesn't matter how much it was worth, right? I gave you collateral, you lost the collateral, now I don't have to pay you. Why are we not saying that? Why are we saying that there's going to be an oath sworn? So the Gemara answers, the law in the Mishnah is with regard to a case where the creditor stated explicitly that he is taking the collateral only to assure payment of the value of the item and not as full repayment. He's not saying that if you don't come back and pay me, I'm going to keep the collateral and then we'll be done. He's just holding the collateral to make sure that the borrower comes back. It's an important nuance. Therefore, since there is a dispute with regard to the collateral's monetary value, the two parties must litigate this matter. Shmuel, by contrast, was referring to a case where the creditor did not state explicitly whether he was taking the collateral to cover only its monetary value or the entire debt. In that case, it is presumed that he took it to cover the entire debt. And the Gemara suggests, let us say that Shmuel's ruling is the subject of a dispute between Tanaim, as it is taught in a Baraisa with regard to one who lends money to another on the basis of collateral, and the collateral was lost, he must take an oath that it was in fact lost, and he may then take his money. This is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva says that the debtor can say to the creditor, didn't you lend me money only on the basis of the collateral? And since the collateral was lost, your money is lost as well. But with regard to one who lends another person 1,000 dinars with a promissory note, and in addition to the note, the debtor left collateral in the creditor's possession, all agree that since the collateral was lost, his money is lost as well. Since he had a promissory note as proof of the loan, the collateral was clearly taken as potential repayment rather than as evidence of the loan. And the Gemara asks, what are the circumstances under which Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva disagree? If it is a case where the collateral was worth the amount of money that the loan was made for, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that although the collateral was lost, the debtor is still liable to pay? Rather, is it not a case where the collateral was not worth the amount of money that he lent him? And accordingly, they disagree with regard to the ruling of Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva holds in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel that if the collateral is lost, the entire debt is canceled, and Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with this opinion. Now we're on page 44a. The Gemara rejects this suggestion. No, in a case where the collateral was not worth the value of the loan, everyone is of the opinion that the ruling is not in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel. But here the dispute is with regard to a case where the collateral was worth the amount of money that he lent him. And they disagree with regard to the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. As Rabbi Yitzchak says, from where is it derived that a creditor acquires collateral given to him and is considered its owner as long as the item is in his possession, as it is stated with regard to a creditor who returns the collateral to the debtor for his personal use, quote, and it shall be a righteousness for you, end quote, Deuteronomy 24:13. So from this, Rabbi Yitzchak infers, if the creditor does not acquire the collateral, and this is where if you lend to a poor person and you take his cloak or his pillow as collateral, you have to give back the collateral so that he can sleep on the pillow or be warm at night, and that will be righteousness for you. Now from this, Rabbi Yitzchak infers, if the creditor does not acquire the collateral, from where is his righteousness? If the collateral did not become his, the creditor would not be giving up anything of his own. From here it is derived that a creditor acquires the collateral. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with this opinion, maintaining that the creditor has the halakhic status of an unpaid bailee with respect to the collateral, so that he is exempt from paying restitution if it is stolen or lost. He can therefore collect the entire debt from the debtor. Rabbi Akiva agrees with the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak and holds that since the creditor acquires the collateral, he bears financial responsibility to pay its value in the event of its loss. Therefore, he must deduct the value of the collateral when collecting payment of the debt, right, in the situation where he lost the collateral. The Gemara asks, if so, shall we say that the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak is the subject of a dispute between Tanaim, sages of the Mishna? The Gemara answers, and how can you understand that? Say that Rabbi Yitzchak says that a creditor acquires the collateral in a case where he took the collateral from him not at the time of the loan, but later, in order to induce him to return the loan, as described in the context of the aforementioned verse. But in a case where the creditor took the collateral from him at the time of the loan, does Rabbi Yitzchak say that he has acquired it? Rather, in a case where he took the collateral from him not at the time of the loan, right, but later, hey, you haven't paid me, I'm seizing your property, I'd rather give it back to you, but I'm going to hold it until you pay me. That's seizing it later. As opposed to, you want to borrow money from me? Give me collateral now. Those are two different cases. So rather, in a case where he took the collateral from him not at the time of the loan, everyone agrees that the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak is accepted. And here the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva is with regard to a case where he took the collateral from him at the time of the loan. And they disagree with regard to the halakhic status, the legal status of one who is safeguarding a lost item that he found but has not yet returned. As it was stated, with regard to one who is safeguarding a lost item, right? It's one thing if I ask you to watch my property for me, even though I'm not paying you, but I asked you to do that for me and you agreed, and then something happens to it. And it's a different thing where you found property in the street and you say, okay, I want to do the mitzvah of returning lost property. So until we figure out, or until you figure out who owns that property, so you are safeguarding it. Now, what if something happens to it while it's in your possession? You only picked it up in order to fulfill the commandment of returning a lost item to its owner. Okay, but until you do that, you're guarding that property. Now, what if it's lost or stolen while you were guarding it? Do you have the status of an unpaid bailee because you never were paid? Or is it a greater responsibility than that because you, after all, are getting the credit for doing this mitzvah? They disagree with regard to the halakhic status of one who is safeguarding a lost item that he found but has not yet returned. As it was stated, with regard to one who is safeguarding a lost item, Rabbah says that his halakhic status is like that of an unpaid bailee, who is exempt from paying restitution in the event that the item is lost or stolen. Now we're on page 44b. No? Yes? Yeah, an unpaid bailee, who is exempt from paying restitution in the event that the item is lost or stolen. Now on page 44b. And Rav Yosef says that his status is like that of a paid bailee, the one who found the lost object and is just holding it until he can find the owner and return it, while he is guarding that property, has the status of a paid bailee, higher level of responsibility and accountability. As, while performing the mitzvah of taking care of a lost item, he is exempt from performing other mitzvahs that involve the outlay of money. And the money that he saves is tantamount to payment received. Similarly, since safeguarding collateral is part of the mitzvah to lend money to the needy, one who does so is exempt during that time from performing other mitzvahs that involve the outlay of money. Therefore, right, in other words, if it costs you money, let's say you find a lost sheep, you have to feed it so that it doesn't die. So that money that you are going to spend feeding somebody else's lost sheep so it doesn't die while you're looking for the owner is money that you would have otherwise given to charity. And you're exempt from giving it to charity because you're using it for the mitzvah of preserving the item that was lost by someone else while you're looking for him so that you can return it. Right? So in that sense, you're a paid bailee and you have the responsibility and accountability of a paid bailee. Therefore, Rabbi Eliezer's ruling that even if the collateral was lost, the creditor collects the entire debt is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbah. And Rabbi Akiva's ruling that the creditor loses the value of the collateral is in accordance with the opinion of Rav Yosef. So the Gemara asks, if so, shall we say that the opinion of Rav Yosef is the subject of a dispute between Tanaim? And the Gemara rejects this suggestion. No. With regard to one who is safeguarding a lost item, everyone accepts the opinion of Rav Yosef, right? Which is that he's a paid bailee. And here they disagree with regard to a case where the creditor needs the collateral and uses it with the permission of the debtor, deducting a usage fee from the debt. One sage, Rabbi Akiva, holds that he is still performing a mitzvah by safeguarding it, and is therefore exempt from performing other mitzvahs during that time, and consequently he has the status of a paid bailee. And the other sage, Rabbi Eliezer, holds that since he derives benefit from the collateral, he is safeguarding it for his own benefit and is not performing a mitzvah, therefore he has the status of an unpaid bailee. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara resumes discussion of Shmuel's statement that if the creditor loses the collateral, the debt is canceled. Let us say that Shmuel's ruling is the subject of a dispute between Tanaim, as it is stated in the Baraisa with regard to the law that the sabbatical year does not abrogate debts for which collateral was taken. And then it says, if one lends money to another on the basis of collateral and the sabbatical year commences, then even if the collateral is worth only half the value of the loan, the sabbatical year does not abrogate the debt. This is the statement of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And Rebbe says, if the value of the collateral was commensurate with his debt, the sabbatical year does not abrogate the debt. But if it was not commensurate with the debt, the sabbatical year does abrogate the debt. Right? This ordinance that loans made with collateral are not abrogated by the sabbatical year, right? In the Shemitah cycle, Why is that? Because the concept was that every 7 years, debts are canceled. So if poor people needed to borrow money, in the 6th year, nobody's going to lend them money because, at the end of the year, the debt's canceled. And so in order to create, that kind of liquidity and the ability of poor people to borrow money when they really need it, they said, okay, but if, you give collateral, then the debt won't be canceled. Well, what if the collateral is significantly less than what the debt was? Is the debt held or is it canceled? Right? So they're saying, well, if the collateral is for the value commensurate with the loan, then the sabbatical year doesn't cancel it. But if the collateral is worth less, then the sabbatical year will cancel the debt. This is a statement of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rebbe says if the value of the collateral was commensurate with his debt, the sabbatical year does not abrogate the debt, but if it was not commensurate with the debt, the sabbatical year does abrogate the debt. So the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the statement, the sabbatical year does not abrogate the debt? Which the first Tana, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, says. If we say it means that the sabbatical year does not abrogate that part of the debt that is commensurate with the collateral, but does abrogate the rest, this indicates by inference that Rebbe holds that the sabbatical year abrogates the entire debt, including the part commensurate with the collateral as well. But if this is so, why did the creditor seize collateral from the debtor at all? Rather, is it not that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that the sabbatical year does not abrogate the debt at all, and the debtor is liable to pay an amount commensurate with the entire debt? And accordingly, they disagree with regard to Shmuel's principle that collateral is considered equivalent to the entire debt, even if it is worth less than the debt. Right? The idea that even if I lend you $1,000 and I'm going to hold, your nail file as collateral, and then I lose your nail file, Shmuel would say, okay, well, you don't have to pay me the $1,000 because I lost the collateral, even though the collateral is worth much less. And the Gemara rejects this suggestion. No, actually, the statement of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel that the sabbatical year does not abrogate the debt is referring only to the part of the debt commensurate with the collateral, and they disagree with regard to that part of the debt. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel holds that the sabbatical year does not abrogate the part of the debt commensurate with the collateral, and Rebbe says that it does abrogate the part of the debt commensurate with the collateral as well. And as for the question you said, for what purpose did he seize collateral from him at all? The answer is that he takes it merely as a reminder to increase the likelihood that the debt will be paid. It sort of functions like a promissory note, though it clearly is not a promissory note, but is evidence that a debt was made and reminds them both that a debt was made and that it should be paid. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 3, I think it was. And with it, we conclude chapter 6. And with God's help, tomorrow at the regular Friday time, we will open chapter 7. Regular Friday time of noon, Pacific. Okay, take a few questions here on Shevuos pages 43 and 44. Lucy, but the paid bailee would swear an oath if he claims that he was robbed, wouldn't he? Correct. I think he would. He is not on the hook if he was robbed, meaning like an armed robber who overpowered him. On the other hand, if it was stolen as opposed to robbed, right? What's the difference? Robbed means, you know who's taking it from you, and he's a thug with a gun or a bow and arrow, sword, whatever, and he overpowers you. That circumstance is beyond his control, so he's not liable to make it good, but he has to swear that that's what happened. If it was stolen from him, meaning when he wasn't looking, a thief came and took it, then the paid bailee is liable for that. There wouldn't be an oath. He would just have to pay. Whereas the unpaid bailee, if it was stolen from him, he could swear an oath that that's what happened, and he would not have to pay. Joseph, such common sense distinctions that we don't make these days. People are used to making rash judgments, but obviously we can't make any accusations when we don't even agree on basic facts. Just so. Very good, Joseph. Sharon, if the candelabrum can come apart, couldn't the small candelabrum be part of the larger one as well, even though not quantified by weight? I would say yes. And I thought that's where they were going, right? And they were saying, well, a small one that doesn't come apart is a different kind of object entirely than a large one that doesn't come apart. But if they do come apart, then the small one can be considered part of the larger one. If he admits that he owes a small one, then it should be a partial admission. And then they seem to say, no, we don't agree with that, because in the case of a belt, that could come in segments. We didn't agree to that. And so then they said it's actually not about the collapsible candelabrum, but rather what the Mishna intended to say, or that Barais intended to say, was about a large candelabrum by weight, that you could scrape silver off it until it weighed less. That was kind of interesting, right? That it could be that two candlesticks. This is why, if you're purchasing silver candlesticks, it's a nice, beautiful wedding gift for somebody. The first question you have to ask if you're ordering it, let's say, online, is how much does it weigh? Because you could have two candlesticks that are this tall, and one of them, weighs 2 ounces of silver, and another one weighs 4 ounces of silver. And really what you're paying for with silver candlesticks is the weight of silver. So if they're talking about candelabrum by weight, and he says, what I always use a smaller one, then you really are talking about silver candlesticks, and we're just arguing about how much silver is in them. Now you can see why that would be a partial admission. Joseph, I actually found a lost calf today with another hiker by a ranch. The cowboy wrangled it in. Let's say I was able to take the calf to my own ranch. Would I be considered a bailee if the owner did not know until I contacted him? According to what we read, yes. Right? Even though you're engaged in a mitzvah, that nobody hired you to watch that cow, but now it became your responsibility. You would think that you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart. It's like being an unpaid bailee. But apparently it's like you're a paid bailee because, in fact, you're getting credit for a very big mitzvah, which is returning a lost item. And even more specifically than that, money that you might have spent on charity, now you're spent feeding that calf until you locate the owner. And so in that sense, you're not contributing to charity. You're doing this instead. And somehow that makes you the paid bailee. I think it's a little confusing, but it seems to be that that's where the law came out, right? That the one who is guarding the lost object, safeguarding the lost object, does have the responsibilities of a paid bailee. Is that where the halakha came out? Let's see. One who is safeguarding a lost item. If one finds a lost item, then for the duration of time the item is in his possession, he is considered a bailee, and he bears the same financial responsibility as a paid bailee to compensate the owner for preventable loss or theft. Preventable loss or theft. If it is lost due to circumstances beyond his control, like you were robbed, then he's exempt. This is the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch, following the opinion of several early commentaries, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Yosef. So that is the law. Pretty interesting. And finally, Frank, the word superfluous, is that a modern word as well? I'm not sure what the question is there. The word superfluous, is that a modern word as well? I'm not sure what you're asking me, but it definitely, when we're saying that a word is, there are no superfluous words in the Torah, right? So if the word is there, it's because it means something. I'm not sure what the question is, but that's what I've got time for today. So with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Friday, at the regular Friday time of noon Pacific. All the best. Have a great night.